September 1944, the muddy fields of France. The air is thick with the acrid smoke of battle. In the distance, artillery shells scream through the sky, exploding in violent bursts. The ground shakes beneath heavy boots. Amidst the chaos, a young African-American soldier crouches behind a broken stone wall, his rifle gripped tightly in his hands. His face, dusted with dirt, is set in determination. His breath is shallow but controlled, each inhalation punctuated by the sound of enemy gunfire in the distance. He peers over the barricade, eyes scanning the horizon. The night is alive with movement. German soldiers march into position, unaware of the trap lying ahead. This is no ordinary soldier. He and his comrades have trained for moments like this. They are part of the 92nd Infantry Division, the Buffalo Soldiers, sent to hold a key position on the battlefield. The world has underestimated them, but not today. As the order is given, they move swiftly, a coordinated dance of precision and stealth. The enemy never expects the intensity and strategy with which these black soldiers engage. What happens next will astonish even their German counterparts, who had long written off black troops as inferior. With one final decisive action, the German forces are caught off guard, forced to retreat. In that moment, as the enemy falls back, a German officer looks on in disbelief, unable to comprehend how the black soldiers have outmaneuvered them. The battle is won, and so too is their fight for respect. The year is 1941. World War II has escalated into a global conflict, engulfing nations in flames of destruction. Yet on the home front in America, the military remains deeply segregated. Black soldiers, though eager to serve their country, are relegated to non-combat roles, often assigned to labor battalions, and given little recognition for their contributions. The U.S. Army at this time operates under a racial hierarchy, steeped in the ideology of white supremacy that permeates all aspects of American life. For decades, African Americans have fought for the right to prove their worth in combat. The early days of the war, however, offer little hope for change. Yet as the war rages on, a shift begins. The demands for soldiers become more dire. The Army needs bodies, and the political pressure to integrate black soldiers into combat units grows louder. In 1941, the formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, later known as the Tuskegee Airmen, becomes a turning point. These men, trained at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, are the first African Americans to serve as fighter pilots in the U.S. military. While their training is rigorous and their morale high, they face tremendous prejudice both from within their ranks and from outside. Despite this, they prove themselves in the skies, protecting bombers and earning praise for their unparalleled courage and skill. Simultaneously, African American infantry units are beginning to be formed, one of the most notable being the 92nd Infantry Division, known as the Buffalo Soldiers. Established during World War I, the division is revived in the 1940s to take part in combat operations. The soldiers, many of whom had already served in the military in some capacity, are seasoned and determined to make their mark. Yet despite their readiness, they are often given limited resources, subpar equipment, and little support. In the training camps across the United States, the Buffalo Soldiers face systemic racism and discrimination. Black officers are given minimal authority, and white officers sometimes attempt to undermine their leadership. The men are told repeatedly that they are unfit for combat. Yet driven by a strong sense of duty and patriotism, they push forward. Many of these soldiers understand that their success in combat could be the key to dismantling the racial barriers that have long confined them. The battle ahead will be more than just about defeating the Axis powers. It will be about fighting for recognition, respect, and equality. These men are not just fighting for victory on the battlefield. They are fighting for a future where their worth as individuals is no longer defined by the color of their skin. The war intensifies in 1944 as the Allies launch Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion. On June 6th, the European theater is on fire. The Nazis are entrenched in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, their forces seemingly impenetrable. The stakes could not be higher. Yet the soldiers of the 92nd Infantry Division, many of whom had already been in combat in North Africa and Italy, are ready for the fight. By now, African American soldiers are more than just infantry. They are critical to the success of the Allies' war effort. though many of them still serve under racially segregated units. The Battle of Normandy, also known as D-Day, marks a significant turning point for the black soldiers in Europe. While the white American units get much of the acclaim, it is the black soldiers who prove their mettle in smaller, yet no less important, skirmishes. The 92nd Infantry Division is tasked with holding a critical position in the mountains of northern Italy, a key strategy for the Allied advance. As they move forward, their determination is tested. These soldiers, who have been denied leadership roles and confined to backline duties, now find themselves at the forefront of a critical battle. Despite being undermanned and under-resourced, they hold the line against a series of German counterattacks. But their courage does not go unnoticed. When they face German forces entrenched in the rough Italian terrain, it is their tactical brilliance that astounds. They employ guerrilla warfare techniques, using their knowledge of the land to ambush German troops, execute swift raids, and disrupt supply lines. For the first time, the Germans start to realize that these African-American soldiers are not just a force to be reckoned with. They are a real threat. However, the racial prejudices from the Allied command still persist. The black soldiers' achievements are often overshadowed by the actions of their white counterparts. Some commanders within the army continue to question whether black soldiers are capable of fighting effectively. Even when their tactical victories begin to accumulate, black troops still struggle against entrenched racial stereotypes. Their victories are often belittled or attributed to luck or the actions of their white officers. Nevertheless, these soldiers, who have been systematically undervalued by their own country, fight on with undying resilience. They know that their battle extends beyond the German lines. It is a fight for equality within their own ranks, a war for the recognition they rightfully deserve. By the time the Battle of the Bulge erupts in December 1944, the black soldiers have earned their place on the front lines. The German offensive in the Ardennes, one of the largest and most desperate counterattacks of the war, puts every soldier to the test. The Allies are caught off guard, and the outcome of the war is uncertain. But the black troops of the 92nd Division, who have seen the horrors of war and the sting of racial injustice, fight back with a fierceness that surprises even the Germans. The German command, who initially underestimated the capabilities of the black soldiers, is now forced to reconsider their stance. Black troops, having learned to fight with ingenuity and resourcefulness, begin to shift the tide of battle. The soldiers of the 92nd Division are no longer viewed as inferior by the Germans. Their tactics, bravery, and sheer willpower have shattered that illusion. As the Allies push back the Germans, the black troops find themselves at the heart of this decisive battle, contributing to the ultimate success of the Allied forces in the European theater. For the African-American soldiers of WWII, the battlefield was not just a physical front but a psychological one. These men not only had to fight the enemy on the other side of the trenches, but also the prejudice that existed within their own ranks. Black soldiers were regularly subjected to racial discrimination by both their fellow troops and their commanders. They were often assigned to the most dangerous and grueling tasks, yet their accomplishments were frequently minimized or erased from official records. The story of Sergeant Carroll, a seasoned veteran from the 92nd Infantry Division, is a testament to the resilience of the black soldier. Carroll had seen the worst of war in North Africa and Italy, but when he was thrust into the Battle of the Bulge, he knew that the stakes were even higher. He and his fellow soldiers faced not only the Nazi forces, but also the psychological weight of representing their race in a hostile world. The pressure was immense, yet despite the oppressive circumstances, Carroll and his comrades pushed forward. Their ability to maintain morale in the face of such adversity became one of the defining features of the division. They took pride in proving that they were more than the racist stereotypes cast upon them. Their determination to win, not just for their country but for their right to be seen as equals, carried them through some of the darkest days of the war. The human cost of this struggle was high. Many soldiers, like CPLer James Long, endured physical and emotional tolls. Long, who fought valiantly in the Italian campaign, recalled the feeling of being both an outsider and a protector. While he faced suspicion from his white counterparts, he found solace and strength in his fellow black soldiers. Together they shared an unspoken bond, forged in the fires of adversity. Despite being given subpar equipment, limited resources, and often undermined by their white commanders, the black soldiers of WWII demonstrated remarkable tactical ingenuity that often caught the enemy off guard. The 92nd Infantry Division, for example, became known for its unorthodox strategies, a result of both necessity and resourcefulness. The division's soldiers quickly adapted to the harsh realities of combat, developing strategies that were nothing short of military genius. In the Italian countryside, where terrain and weather posed severe challenges, the black soldiers of the 92nd Division used their intimate knowledge of the land to their advantage. Their guerrilla tactics, swift ambushes, feigned retreats, and surprise flanking maneuvers became the hallmark of their combat style. These soldiers made use of every available resource. They would often create makeshift weapons or repurpose enemy equipment. A soldier might use a captured German rifle or reconfigure an old Jeep into a mobile artillery post. Their ability to adapt and innovate allowed them to hold key positions for longer than any other unit could have managed under similar circumstances. One of the most striking instances of their tactical brilliance came during the Battle of Anzio in early 44. Trapped behind enemy lines, the 92nd Division's soldiers used the dense forests and mountains of Italy to outmaneuver the Germans. They executed ambushes that left the Germans scrambling to understand how they had been outflanked, never suspecting that black soldiers were behind it. Even in larger engagements, such as the Battle of the Bulge, the tactical acumen of black soldiers became clear. As German forces pushed through the Ardennes, threatening to break the Allied lines, it was often the smaller, underfunded black units that were asked to hold the most vulnerable sectors. They deployed anti-tank tactics with incredible effectiveness, setting traps for the German panzers that used the terrain to neutralize their superior firepower. The Germans, who were initially confident that their well-trained forces would crush these black units, were taken by surprise at the level of tactical proficiency on display. Despite their success, their achievements were often overshadowed. In many official military reports, the black soldiers' efforts were downplayed or credited to the success of their white commanders. But in the eyes of the enemy, their capabilities were undeniable. German soldiers captured during the war remarked time and again on how their captors had used tactics that no one, least of all the Germans, had expected. As the Allies advanced deeper into Europe, these black soldiers continued to apply their guerrilla tactics, outthinking and outmaneuvering their German adversaries, all while remaining at the forefront of the Allied push. Their tactical brilliance not only contributed immensely to the success of the Allied campaign, but also demonstrated on a global stage the capabilities of soldiers who had been systematically overlooked and underestimated. In the face of institutionalized racism and segregation, the African American soldiers of WWII did not only have to confront the enemy, but also the prejudices within their own military command. Many of the black troops, despite their proven abilities, were denied leadership positions or placed under white commanders, who often failed to understand or respect their capabilities. Yet some black officers and non-commissioned officers, NCOs, rose to the occasion, proving themselves as exceptional leaders and inspiring their troops to extraordinary feats. One such leader was General Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a trailblazer who rose to the rank of Brigadier General in 1942, the first African-American officer to do so. Davis had long faced the challenges of racial discrimination in the military. From the time he entered West Point in the early 1900s, where he was one of only a handful of black cadets, he encountered immense prejudice. Despite being systematically excluded from social circles and suffering from the belief that he wasn't qualified for leadership, Davis remained steadfast. He carried these burdens into his role during WWII, commanding the 332nd Fighter Group, the famed Tuskegee Airmen, in Italy. Under Davis's leadership, the Tuskegee Airmen not only proved their worth in combat, but also helped to redefine the notion of black leadership within the military. Their success, especially during strategic bombing campaigns, demonstrated that African Americans could be not just competent, but exceptional leaders in combat. Davis's steady leadership, commitment to duty, and ability to inspire his men were instrumental in the airmen's success. Despite the constant pressure to prove themselves, Davis led his unit to an impressive record, with a combat success rate that rivaled other, more established groups. Another significant figure was Colonel Paul L. Bates, who served as a commander of the 92nd Infantry Division. Bates was an experienced and tough leader who earned the respect of his men through sheer determination and a profound understanding of military strategy. When the 92nd was thrust into battle, Bates made critical decisions that would alter the course of their involvement in Italy and beyond. He focused on training his soldiers in tactics that played to their strengths and made use of the resources at hand. However, the real power of Bates's leadership was in his unwavering belief in the potential of his men. Bates saw the 92nd Infantry not as a segregated division of underperforming troops, but as soldiers who could rise to any challenge. He worked tirelessly to inspire his men, rallying them against the enemies of both the battlefield and the racial prejudices that plagued their own ranks. Despite these inspiring leaders, the division still faced constant struggles against higher-ups who questioned their leadership abilities. On many occasions, white officers sought to undermine the achievements of black soldiers, downplaying their victories or attributing them to other factors. Yet, time and again, the leadership of black officers, like Davis and Bates, proved that they were not only equal to their white counterparts, but often superior in the face of adversity. Their leadership gave the troops the confidence they needed to fight with valor, knowing that their commanders believed in them, even if the larger military establishment did not. This sense of solidarity and faith in leadership became a cornerstone of the success that black soldiers would later achieve in the war. They fought not just for victory, but for the belief that their leadership, their skills, and their courage were valid and deserving of recognition. At the outset of WWII, the Germans, like much of the Western world, held deeply ingrained racial prejudices. These beliefs were not only a part of their ideology, but were also reflected in their military strategy. They viewed African American soldiers as inferior and expected them to be incapable of mounting serious resistance. This perception was not only a racial stereotype, but also a strategic miscalculation that would, in the end, cost them dearly. German commanders, upon encountering black soldiers for the first time, were surprised at the level of organization and effectiveness these troops exhibited. At the Battle of Anzio in Italy, for example, German officers expected the black soldiers of the 92nd Infantry Division to fall easily to the might of the German army. They believed that these soldiers, relegated to support roles in the past, lacked the training and tenacity required to engage in full-scale combat. The German military, with its emphasis on discipline and rigor, underestimated the tactical brilliance that the black units had developed through adversity and necessity. When German soldiers first engaged with the 92nd, they were taken aback by the tactical ingenuity these men employed. The black soldiers' use of the terrain, their guerrilla warfare tactics, and their relentless assaults on German positions were unlike anything the German forces had anticipated. Instead of faltering under pressure, these soldiers adapted quickly, using the dense forests and mountains of Italy to outflank German forces and create chaos within their ranks. In one particular skirmish during the Battle of the Bulge, German commanders reported that the black soldiers had executed a near-perfect ambush, catching the Germans off guard and forcing them to retreat. This was not the behavior of soldiers who were supposed to be inferior. The German soldiers who survived the encounter later reported how their confidence had been shattered by the resilience and tactical proficiency of the black American troops. The Germans' perception began to shift as their forces realized that these black soldiers were no less capable than their white counterparts. Their well-coordinated attacks and resourceful use of limited ammunition and equipment became legendary. German officers, particularly those who were taken as prisoners of war, commented on the surprising efficiency of the black soldiers. They were shocked to witness men whom they had thought of as second-class soldiers outmaneuvering them at every turn. As the war progressed, the German army came to respect the fighting spirit and ingenuity of these troops. Their shock and disbelief at the capabilities of black soldiers was a direct result of their initial failure to recognize the skill, determination, and tactical brilliance of these units. It was this underestimation that allowed the black soldiers to gain the upper hand in key battles, turning the tide in favor of the Allies. By the time the war came to a close, the German forces had learned the hard way that they had been wrong about the black soldiers. The very troops they had discounted as weak and untrained had proved to be some of the most effective combatants on the battlefield. For the black soldiers, Their triumphs on the front lines had not only helped to secure victory for the Allies, but had also shattered the racial myths that had been used to marginalize them. For the African American soldiers of WWII, the battle was about more than just military victory. It was a fight for dignity, respect, and the recognition of their humanity in a society that systematically denied them equality. They were caught in a paradox, fighting for a country that dehumanized them, all while proving that they were more than capable of defending that very country. In doing so, they became symbols of a deeper moral struggle, one that transcended the immediate conflict of the war. While the Germans were an enemy on the battlefield, the fight for justice and equality within the U.S. military was an internal struggle, one that many soldiers felt on a daily basis. Black soldiers fought not only for the survival of their comrades and the defeat of fascism, but also for their own rights as human beings. Their courage in the face of profound adversity became a testament to their commitment to both their country and to a future where they could stand shoulder to shoulder with their white counterparts, not as subordinates but as equals. The experiences of these soldiers mirrored the moral complexities of the time. Despite facing discrimination in training camps, enduring poor living conditions, and being given the most dangerous and grueling assignments, the black soldiers of WWII fought with honor. They understood that the value of their service would not only be measured by their victories over the Axis powers, but also by their ability to fight for the basic rights they had long been denied. For soldiers like Sergeant George Thomas, the emotional toll of these racial tensions was heavy. A member of the 92nd Infantry, he recalled the constant struggle to keep morale high when faced with both enemy fire and the relentless barrage of racial prejudice. He spoke of the internal conflict he felt every time he had to prove his worth on the battlefield, knowing that if he failed, the entire African American race would be blamed for it. It was not just a fight for victory in war, but a fight for self-respect in a country that often saw them as inferior. This moral battle was perhaps most poignantly felt during moments of camaraderie with fellow black soldiers. Despite the racial divisions that existed within the military, these soldiers formed tight-knit units where every man had each other's back, knowing that their very survival depended on one another. The bond formed by shared struggles on and off the battlefield helped to strengthen their resolve. Each victory, every successful mission was not just a win for the Allied forces, but a moral victory over the societal prejudices they had long endured. In the larger context of WW, the black soldiers' experiences echoed a significant moral dilemma: how to reconcile the ideals of freedom and democracy with a nation that denied those ideals to its own people. The bravery they displayed was not just in their combat skills, but in their defiance of an unjust system. They understood that every battle they won was one step closer to proving that African Americans, despite centuries of oppression, were just as capable, just as heroic, and just as worthy of recognition as any other soldier. Their moral struggle became one of the defining features of the war for African American soldiers. In fighting for their country and their rights, they unknowingly set the stage for the post-war civil rights movement, where the lessons learned on the battlefield would fuel the push for equality in every corner of American society. The fight they waged, when against both the enemy and the injustice within their own ranks, became a testament to the power of honor, perseverance, and the belief that no human being should ever be judged by the color of their skin. December 1944, the bitter cold of the Ardennes forest in Belgium. The snow falls relentlessly, blanketing the battlefield in a layer of eerie silence broken only by the distant rumble of artillery and the crackling of gunfire. The German forces, having launched a surprise counteroffensive in what would come to be known as the Battle of the Bulge, are pushing deep into Allied territory, threatening to break the front lines. The American forces are caught off guard, struggling to respond to the sheer ferocity of the German assault. But amidst the chaos and confusion, there is one force that will not retreat: the 92nd Infantry Division, the Buffalo Soldiers. These men, who had been cast aside by many of their own superiors, now find themselves in the heart of one of the most pivotal battles of the war. Their mission is to hold a critical sector of the Ardennes, a position that, if lost, could unravel the Allied defense and possibly change the course of the war. For the men of the 92nd, the stakes are higher than ever. Not only are they fighting the enemy, but they are also fighting the racial prejudices that still permeate the military. They know that their every move, every decision, will be scrutinized, that the outcome of this battle could decide not just the war, but the future of black soldiers in the military. Under the leadership of commanders like Colonel Paul L. Bates, the 92nd soldiers hold their ground. The Germans, confident in their superiority, do not expect much resistance from a division they've long dismissed as ineffective. But what the Germans do not anticipate is the fierce tactical brilliance and unyielding resolve of these black soldiers. With limited resources, poor weather conditions, and overwhelming odds, they defend their position with extraordinary tenacity. Amidst the thick fog of war, the battle becomes a test of not just military strategy, but of willpower. The 92nd Infantry Division holds the line, executing ambushes, creating traps, and making use of every terrain advantage they can find. The Germans, who had expected an easy victory, are now reeling from the unexpected resistance. As the days pass and the battle intensifies, the soldiers of the 92nd find themselves fighting not just for the Allied cause, but for something far deeper, the recognition of their worth. The Battle of the Bulge becomes a defining moment, a chance for them to prove once and for all that they are just as capable as their white counterparts. For German officers, the realization is both shocking and unsettling. The black soldiers are not the untrained, disorganized force they had been led to believe. Instead, they are skilled tacticians, disciplined warriors, and formidable opponents. One German officer captured during the battle later remarked, "We never thought they could fight like that. They were too good, too smart. We underestimated them, and it cost us." In that crucial moment, as the tide of battle begins to shift, the 92nd Division stands tall. They hold their position, their resolve unwavering even as the Germans push closer. The Battle of the Bulge would eventually end in an Allied victory, and the 92nd Infantry Division would play a key role in this triumph. It would mark a turning point not just for the war, but for the recognition of black soldiers' contributions to the military effort. For the Buffalo Soldiers, the battle is a victory not just over the German army, but over the racial prejudice that had dogged them throughout their service. Their courage and tactical brilliance in the face of adversity forever silenced the doubts of those who had questioned their abilities. As the Battle of the Bulge draws to a close, the tides of war begin to shift, and with it comes an undeniable realization, one that reverberates across the German lines and within the ranks of the Allied forces. The 92nd Infantry Division, the very soldiers who had once been dismissed, whose every action had been scrutinized and belittled, had held their ground against a ruthless and overwhelming enemy. Their victory was not only a tactical win, but a symbolic one, shifting the perception of black soldiers forever. In the aftermath of the battle, reports from German prisoners begin to surface and the tone changes. The same soldiers who had once sneered at the black troops now spoke in disbelief. "We didn't expect them to fight like this," one German officer later admitted. "They had tactics we had not prepared for. They adapted to the terrain, to the cold, to every obstacle with a precision that shocked us." For the first time, the Germans, who had long held a view of racial superiority, were forced to confront the reality that these black soldiers were no less capable than any other soldier in the field. Their initial underestimation, based purely on racial prejudice, had been their greatest mistake. The battle had been intense, but it was the resilience of the 92nd that proved to be the deciding factor. The soldiers of the 92nd, having fought through the harsh winter, the relentless German assault, and the psychological burden of representing their entire race on the world stage, now stood victorious. The Germans had been humbled by the tactical genius and unwavering resolve of soldiers they had once thought inferior. In the heat of battle, the enemy had learned a hard lesson, that the black soldiers of the 92nd Division were far from the simple, untrained force they had been perceived to be. Beyond the battlefield, the men of the 92nd would see their efforts finally recognized. Their achievements, once ignored or downplayed, now came to the forefront of military reports. It was not only the Allied command that took note, but the U.S. military as well. The realization began to set in that black soldiers, once confined to the periphery of military service, were integral to the Allied war effort. For the men of the 92nd, it was a hard-earned acknowledgement of their competence and courage, a hard-fought battle for the respect they deserved. But it wasn't just the military that took notice. The impact of their victory rippled through society. The victory of the 92nd Infantry Division was symbolic of something much greater, the beginning of the end of the racial segregation that had plagued the U.S. military for so long. While change was slow, the battle marked a shift in the way black soldiers were viewed by both the military and the American public. In the wake of the Battle of the Bulge, the Buffalo Soldiers' reputation soared, and their tactical brilliance was finally recognized. The tides of public opinion had begun to turn. These soldiers who had fought for the country that had long denied them equality were now seen as true warriors. Their victory would pave the way for future integration in the military, leading to the eventual desegregation of the armed forces in 1948. It was a hard-won victory, but one that not only shifted the perception of black soldiers, but also set the stage for the civil rights movement that would follow in the 1950s and 1960s. The 2nd Infantry Division had proven that bravery, skill, and leadership had no color, and that the fight for equality would never stop on the battlefield or beyond. The war in Europe finally draws to a close in May 1945. The Allies have triumphed over the Nazi regime, and the world begins to turn its focus to the aftermath of the conflict. The 92nd Infantry Division, the Tuskegee Airmen and other black military units that fought valiantly during the war, now face a new challenge: the struggle for recognition. Although they had proven their worth on the battlefield time and again, the hard-fought victories of African American soldiers were still not fully acknowledged by the military establishment. The bravery and tactical genius displayed by these soldiers were overshadowed for years by the racial prejudices that lingered in the ranks. Yet as the dust of war settled, there was a shift in the national consciousness. The courage of black soldiers who had fought to secure the freedoms of others while being denied those very freedoms at home began to receive the recognition it deserved. Their actions during key battles, especially the Battle of the Bulge, had made it undeniable. Black soldiers were more than capable. They were integral to the success of the Allied forces. The end of the war did not immediately bring about racial equality within the U.S. military, but it planted the seeds for change. The military, although slow to act, began to take a hard look at the role of black soldiers and the value they brought to the fighting force. The success of units like the 92nd Division and the Tuskegee Airmen, whose excellence could no longer be ignored, paved the way for desegregation in the military. President Harry S. Truman's Executive Order 9981, issued in 1948, was a direct result of the tireless efforts of these black soldiers. This executive order officially ended racial segregation in the armed forces, marking a monumental step forward in the civil rights struggle. While it would take years for full integration to take place, the victories and contributions of black soldiers during WWII helped force the issue into the national spotlight. Beyond the military, the impact of black soldiers' service was also felt in broader society. The courage and resilience displayed by the men of the 92nd Infantry Division and other black units during the war became a powerful symbol in the fight for racial equality. Their bravery challenged the prevailing notion of racial inferiority, and their wartime experiences would fuel the growing demand for civil rights reforms. The post-war years saw the emergence of leaders such as Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., who would lead the charge in the fight for racial equality. The contributions of black soldiers during the war, particularly in key battles where they demonstrated exceptional skill and leadership, helped galvanize the civil rights movement, showing that the struggle for freedom, equality, and respect did not end with the war, but was a fight that continued at home. While many black soldiers returned to a country that was still segregated and rife with discrimination, their service in WWII had created an undeniable precedent for change. The lessons learned on the battlefield, where black soldiers had to fight not just against enemy forces but also against racial prejudice, would serve as the foundation for future generations who would continue the fight for equality in all aspects of American life. As the years passed and WWII faded into history, the legacy of the African American soldiers who fought in the conflict became more apparent. Their contributions were not just limited to military victories. They played a pivotal role in the larger battle for civil rights in America. The courage and tactical brilliance displayed by black soldiers, like those of the 92nd Infantry Division and the Tuskegee Airmen, had shattered racial stereotypes, that had long been ingrained in both military and civilian life. They had proven that Black Americans were not only capable of excelling in combat, but also worthy of respect and equality. In the years following the war, these soldiers became symbols of perseverance, fortitude, and the struggle for justice. Their success on the battlefield helped spark a rethinking of race in America. As the war had demonstrated, Black soldiers were just as competent, courageous, and capable as their white counterparts. This realization would have a profound impact on the public perception of Black Americans in the years to come. The military, still rife with institutionalized racism, began to slowly change in response to the undeniable contributions of Black soldiers. The Army's desegregation, marked by President Truman's executive order in 1948, did not come overnight. However, the groundwork had been laid during the war, when Black soldiers had held critical positions and carried out successful missions, despite being undermined and doubted by their superiors. The high level of performance exhibited by the Buffalo Soldiers and other Black combat units made it clear to military leaders that segregation was no longer tenable if they were to maintain an effective and unified fighting force. These Black soldiers also found recognition outside of the military establishment. Their achievements during the war gave rise to a new narrative, one where Black Americans were not defined by the limitations of racism, but by their ability to overcome those obstacles. The post-war period saw Black veterans demand equal treatment, not just in the military, but in society. The struggles they had faced in combat mirrored the struggles they faced at home, as they returned to a country still gripped by racial discrimination. As these veterans returned to civilian life, their experience became a powerful tool for challenging inequality. The veterans' organizations and civil rights groups that formed in the wake of the war became key players in the fight for racial equality. Their testimony, bolstered by the undeniable proof of their service and sacrifice, fueled the growing civil rights movement. Figures like A. Philip Randolph, Thurgood Marshall, and Medgar Evers rose to prominence, fighting for the rights of Black Americans in a society that had long denied them justice. Perhaps the most profound legacy of these Black soldiers was in the field of education and employment, areas where racial segregation and discrimination had long been the norm. The Black veterans of WWII, who had been denied opportunities for advancement in the military due to their race, returned home with newfound confidence and determination. They sought higher education, career advancement, and equal rights under the law. They knew that the fight for freedom and equality was not over. The military victories they had secured on foreign battlefields were a stark reminder of what could be achieved when they were allowed to reach their full potential. Their legacy, built on the foundation of victories won in the most difficult of circumstances, became a beacon for future generations. The fight for civil rights in America gained momentum in the 1950s and 1960s, with Black soldiers and veterans playing key roles in the movement. Their experiences in the war, and the undeniable proof of their abilities, were central to the moral arguments for desegregation, voting rights, and economic equality. In the decades following WWII, the Tuskegee Airmen, the 92nd Infantry Division, and other Black military units were finally given the recognition they had long deserved. Their stories were retold in books, films, and documentaries, ensuring that future generations would remember their sacrifice and their struggle for equality. Their bravery in combat helped change the course of history, not just in military terms, but in the ongoing fight for racial justice in America. The soldiers of WWII had fought for a better world, not just for the freedom of other nations, but for the future of their own. And while the struggle for full equality was far from over, the victories they achieved on the battlefield were a crucial step in the long march toward justice. The contributions of Black soldiers during World War II, particularly those of the 92nd Infantry Division and the Tuskegee Airmen, are often overlooked in the broader narrative of the war. Yet the legacy of their sacrifice and courage extends far beyond the battlefield. Their story is not just about military strategy and valor, but about the enduring human spirit, the fight for dignity, and the quest for equality in a world that had long denied them both. In the face of systemic racism and entrenched prejudice, these soldiers fought not only for the freedom of others, but for the freedom of their own people. Their actions on the battlefield, marked by bravery and tactical brilliance, shattered the myths of racial inferiority that had been used to keep them in the shadows. Their victories became more than just military triumphs. They were a profound statement about the capability and worth of Black Americans. The recognition of their service, slow as it was, helped pave the way for a larger cultural shift in the U.S. The civil rights movement, which would rise in the years following the war, found strength in the courage of these soldiers. They had shown that Black Americans could excel in every arena, including those that had been historically closed off to them. The fight they fought on the front lines was the same fight they would carry forward into the struggle for racial equality in America. The significance of their service is not just about the battles they fought or the victories they won. It is about the doors they opened, not just in the military but in society as a whole. Their triumphs became a cornerstone of the ongoing fight for civil rights, and their legacy continues to inspire future generations in the pursuit of equality and justice. The story of the Black soldiers of WWII is not just one of war, it is one of perseverance, honor, and a moral victory that transcended the battlefields of Europe and echoed in the civil rights movements of the 1950s and 1960s. Their courage laid the foundation for the transformation of not only the U.S. military but also the country itself, pushing America closer to realizing the ideals of equality and freedom upon which it was founded. As we reflect on their legacy, we are reminded that true victory is not always measured by the number of battles won, but by the courage to fight for what is right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. The Black soldiers of WWII, through their perseverance, proved that the fight for justice is not just a battle against external enemies, but a battle against the forces of oppression within our own hearts and minds. They fought for a future in which all people, regardless of race, could be seen for their abilities, not their skin color. Their story will continue to inspire and guide us in the ongoing struggle for equality and justice.